Yo, how's it going? Uh, so I kind of came across this video called "What If We Just Stop Working" by Second Thought, and I kind of want to watch that, but also I wanted to watch the whole quiet quitting movement, which I am a huge fan of, coming from someone that that has had you know drinks spilled on top of their heads because your manager told you to kick that person out, to getting followed home because the manager told you you can't let him in. Many times it's because the manager tells me something crazy happens. I've been followed home, and then I've been had someone spill a whole entire like drink on top of my head. uh it's just been many times where I feel like I've tried to you know go a little bit above and beyond for certain situations, and I'm the one that gets shitted on. Like it's just like that. Like I always, like, at some point I always told my the people that came into work that, hey man, just do the minimum work, minimum pay. That's all you gotta do, man. We get paid the minimum. We should do the minimum work. And to hear that quiet quitting is something that's it's a movement that's been getting like you know thrown out there, and like you know people are following it. I'm super happy. I believe that people shouldn't go above and beyond to someone that's so easy to tell you that you're disposable. Many times I've seen people get like disposed of so fast because they feel like, oh well, like in many years. Like I remember this lady was telling me she worked for many years at this job, and as soon as she made one mistake, she was out of there. And I feel like, and she said, I put so many years there, and I just like that, it wasted my life. And yeah, so let's go ahead and watch.
I want to tell you about this new trend at work. It's called quiet quitting. So, quiet quitting, it's not about quitting your job. It's about refusing to go above and beyond at work. It's about setting your workplace boundaries.
Yeah.
So, I pulled this clip from TikTok, and I think it's a very good summary of quiet quitting. So, please take a look.
Quiet quitting is essentially employee disengagement, where workers stop going above and beyond what's asked, stop completing tasks and projects without compensation, and stop overly participating in workplace hustle culture. The trend has been triggered by widespread employee burnout, the Great Resignation, and new workplace policies following the COVID-19 pandemic.
Now, I want to give you my reaction. She said that this trend has been triggered by employee burnouts, the Great Resignation, and new policies at work after COVID. First, I don't believe that this is a new trend. A trend, that's something that comes and goes within a short period of time. It could be a few months, it could be a few years.
Yeah.
Essentially, quiet quitting is employee disengagement. It's about employees not being motivated, right? So from my perspective, what we're seeing today with quiet quitting, it's nothing new. I'm going to give you some more information about quiet quitting, and then I'm going to share with you my opinions and my experience with quiet quitting. So I think most people get it. People understand the situation. When you work for a company, the company wants to maximize their profits. This involves squeezing the maximum output from the employees and paying the employees as little as possible. This is called, well, the company, they would call this capital.
Sometimes those companies will mess up your checks, and they will, throw a big hubbub when you try to tell them to fix it. It's
Capitalism. The employee,
ridiculous.
so from the employee's perspective, they ideally want to receive the maximum amount of pay and they want to do the least amount of work. From the employee's perspective, they call this fair. So I'm just keeping it real. This is how it is it not? So basically, here's the situation. Many companies are trying to milk their employees and they're trying to maximize their profits. Some employees are not okay with this and they're rebelling by quiet quitting. ResumeBuilder.com surveyed 1,000 working Americans in August. 74% of respondents said that they go above and beyond their job description. 21% of respondents said that they are quiet quitting and only doing the bare minimum amount of work. So 21%. So I hope that gives you a sense of how prevalent that this is. 22% of men and 20% of women said that they are quiet quitting. So please comment down below. Let me know what you think about this whole situation, about quiet quitting. What's your opinion? I'm going to give you my opinion in just a minute. However, I want you to know that this is what the employees are saying. These are what the quiet quitters are saying. They're saying these types of things. They're saying that they don't want to overwork themselves because it could lead to burnouts. Going above and beyond at work could compromise their mental health. Work-life balance is a priority.
For real, that's another thing. Like there was at one point where I experienced like this. Like I used to work overnight shifts, like constantly, and it was like hours. And I would never ask for a day off, just because if like they had a day off, they didn't compensate you. You didn't get paid. If you asked for the day off, you didn't get paid. So I always had to work for a day off, and it came to a certain point where I would be dealing with so much things in that job, and I just I was just always, I woke up with anxiety and stress, thinking, oh my God, who am I going to have to either fight? Who's gonna come here and steal? What homeless man is gonna come here and go wild on me? It was, Joe, I was just not in the best mental state at that point. I was just stressed and full of anxiety. Uh, and they didn't want to get a security guard. They were really like, we had to like always push them. It was just awful. It was awful, and that caused so much like burnout in my opinion. And yeah, I just stopped caring at that point. I just stopped caring.
And your work should not define you, and you should focus your time and energy on things that you do outside of work. So let me know what you think.
That's also true.
Now, this is where I give you my opinion. About 12 years ago, I was a quiet quitter. Let me tell you my experience, and let me share with you what I found out and what I realized. So I was working a corporate job at a Fortune 100 company, so I hated that place. I was miserable. The workplace, it was a very toxic environment. It was so bad that a fist fight, it broke out in the office 2 times when I was there. And one time it involved a grandma. So I can't even make this stuff up.
Wow.
So the commute was awful. Management, they treated you like garbage, but you had to force a smile or you had to pretend to be interested in what they were saying. Subjective performance reviews, at the end of the day, I just dreaded just going into the office,
I feel you.
Now, I put up with this torture because I was young and naive. I thought that if you work hard and you do what's best for the company, then the company, you can rely on them to take care of you, to reward you properly. Well, 1 year goes by. It's time for my...
Well, that's a fucking lie, ain't it? Holy shit. Like,
performance review. I'm like, hopefully I get a big raise. So they call me in and they say, Brian, you're doing such a good job. You are such an asset to this company. So that's how the conversation starts. I think, wow, this conversation is off to a really good start.
I hate when they manipulate you like this too. I hate it. I despise it. When people try to manipulate you saying that you're doing a fantastic job when knowing damn well I was not. I was doing the worst job. Like they try to butter you up a little bit, and you're like, oh wow, what am I doing? Yeah, man. And then they make you try and bend over backwards to do some other crazy shit. I despise that. I really do.
Like where this is headed. And then they tell me, but as you know, we're going through a recession. However, you're such an asset to this company. You're doing so good. So we're going to be generous to you. We're going to give you a 2% raise. Congratulations. Keep up the good work.
And here comes some
when I heard
payload.
that, I was in disbelief. Like I was in shock. I was like, you guys cannot be serious.
Yeah.
So I busted my ass off for the whole year for a lousy 2% raise. Now I thought immediately I would have been better off if I was just slacking off, just doing the bare minimum, and I would have been okay with a 1% or a 0% raise. So anyways, from my perspective, my thought process as an employee in that situation was, all this hard work that I did for the company, going above and beyond, just being such a good employee, it didn't pay off. It wasn't worth it to me because it's a 2% raise. Like, give me a break. Anyways, immediately after that happened, I decided to quiet quits. But in my days, we just called it slacking off. So this is what I did. I told myself that I need to get out of here. I need to get out of this job. So I decided that I'm going to start my own business. I'm going to start my own tax practice. But I was recently out of college and I had no money. So I decided that, I tried to get clever. I decided to slack off at work. So I'm going to slack off at work. I'm going to collect a paycheck. And I'm going to start building my tax practice on the side. So I decided to do the bare minimum amount of work, just enough to get by at work and not get fired. Now, you are expected to get into the office around 8:30 a.m. and people are usually leaving around 5:30 p.m. So that was the norm. So I thought, that doesn't work for me. I'm trying to build a business here. So I rolled into the office typically around 9:30 a.m., a little bit late. I'd leave a little bit early at 4:30 p.m. Now, when it was lunchtime, people would take like a 20 or 30 minute lunch break. They would go to lunch around like 11:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. I took the full 2 hours. I would take 11:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. as my lunch break. Now, this was my behavior when I decided to quiet quit. Like, I really didn't care. Like, I stopped caring. There's pros and cons to this, and we're going to get into that.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I'm not lazy at all. I am not a lazy person. In fact, I'm a very hardworking person. Like, I was using my lunch breaks to work on emails with my clients or potential clients, and I would be using my lunch breaks and leaving early so that I can meet with new clients or pick up business.
I got called lazy. I call it like I remember these Latino dudes called me a lazy, like, slur, and it was like, I wish you guys knew. I wish you guys knew the bullshit I had to come get with.
Now, I want to tell you this. So this is a little bit of advice, some recommendations, but this is coming from personal experience. As soon as you quiet quit, your boss or your bosses, they're gonna catch on pretty quickly.
Yep.
If you're gonna quiet quits, I would recommend that it be a gradual progression, so a gradual process. Like, I didn't jump into 2-hour lunch breaks immediately. Like, I had to work my way up there. You start showing up to work a little bit late. You start leaving a little bit earlier.
Minutes, 10
and then you get a little bit more
30
bold.
minutes.
Just a little bit. It's a gradual process. Little by little, bolder and bolder as time goes on. Because if you're too bold, just right from the get-go, it might be too much of a shock to management, and then you might be at risk of getting fired immediately. Now, here's what happened to me. After 1 year went by, like, I'm surprised it even dragged out that long. My bosses, they had enough. They told me, Brian, we noticed that you're away from your cube a lot. They warned me. They said that if you get 3 strikes, then you're going to be fired, and this is your first strike. I disagreed because the way I saw it, I was getting my job done. Like, I was providing and doing what they told me to do. I just wasn't going above and beyond.
And the hour get cut.
Again, I didn't want to, because for what? A 2% raise? It just wasn't worth it to me. So after that first strike, do you know what I decided to change? Absolutely nothing. I was quiet quitting. Okay, so I got my first strike. And a few weeks later, not even a month passes by, just a few weeks later, my boss tells me, Brian, we need to have another talk. I know what my boss is gonna say. My boss tells me that I'm getting a second strike, and my boss literally tells me that I need to get with the program. So you know what I did? I went to my cubicle, I picked up my personal items, just a handful of things, I went straight to my car, I drove off, I never came back. One of the best decisions of my life. So I don't believe in 2-week notices. I didn't even give a 2-second notice. I just left. Now, I want to say this to all the quiet quitters. This is very important for me to say this to you. And it's also very important that you hear this, because this is coming, again, from my experience. I cannot promise that you're going to have a happy outcome like I did. Like, I'm very fortunate on how things worked out for me.
That is true.
I just want you to know that I
true.
understand your situation. I know how you feel. I've been there. So trust me, believe me, I know. So with that being said, and you knowing where I'm coming from, I want to give you some advice. If the economy gets worse, I just want you to realize the ramifications, the realities. If the economy gets worse, you're going to be the first one on the chopping block to get fired. So I don't know how important that is to you or not. I mean, to me, that wasn't important, but maybe to you it would be. It will be. So I'm just warning you how it is. And here's another thing. If you're quiet quitting, you're not going to be the first pick to get promoted. I think you're clearly aware of that. It's going to be difficult for you to climb up the corporate ladder if that's something you're interested in. If you don't get promoted, then you're not going to get compensated as much as you could or as much as you'd like, in comparison to if you were hustling at work. But that would go against the whole quiet quitting trend, right?
Yeah.
So I just want you to have fair warning of the consequences of quiet quitting. These are the trade-offs. These are the realities.
So from my perspective, when if I left that job and everything, I the next job I entered, I immediately drew the line. I drew the line. I wasn't going to go above and beyond. Like I told them, because I entered a restaurant next, and basically like they would want me to I got hired at this store at this location, and when they were short staffed at another location or another you know yeah, another restaurant, they would want me to go, and they would like try to like tip me like a little bit or whatever. I wasn't happy there either. So, but either way, but I did draw the line. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I replied to this location. I kind of made it clear that I did not want to do that, and they would, and the manager would like, kind of give me this like, I thought we were friends type thing, and I'm like, no, we're not friends, man. We are not friends. But anyway, yeah, and yeah, I say when you if you quite quit and then it's time for you to leave to a next job or to your next adventure, like draw the line super hard. Like do not budge or anything, because people are gonna want you to like, they're gonna want to see how flexible and bendable you can be with certain situations. And yeah, no, I knew immediately like uh, I'm not gonna bend over or go out of my way, to make you guys happy. I genuinely like, and I would always get this thing from the chefs. It seems like you're only here for the money. And I said, yes, I'm only here for the money. Like I'm not here. I like to cook. Don't get me wrong. It's fun cooking when I'm at home and I'm not pressured to do all the shenanigans, and so I did the bare minimum. I made sure everything was properly cooked. Everything was like, as fast as I could make it. And I'm not gonna get like, I'm not trying to like, you know, go crazy. Uh, so yeah, no, like, yeah, the cooks would always tell me, "Oh, it seems like you don't want to be here," or "It seems like," and I told them, "Yes, I only here for the money." Um, like I'm not gonna go crazy or anything, and they didn't take that well, and so I kind of had this kind of there was like a little bit of a tension between everyone, but I did not care, bro. Like I'm not your friends. I'm not your friend. I'm not, you know, no one really. Like we can be cool, but you're gonna know that there's a certain line that I'm gonna set. So yeah, just I highly suggest like if you quiet quit, next venture comes, next job comes, draw the line. Don't budge for anything. Like don't
On
let
top of
people
all that, on top of
intimidate
everything I
you.
just said, I want to tell you this because this is not something that you're going to read about, and nobody's going to tell you this. I'm telling you this out of personal experience. On top of everything I just said, you're going to experience some additional stress and anxiety. Like, oh man, I wonder how upset my bosses are at me today
It's
because you're quiet
it's
quitting.
really like,
Or will
again,
today be the day that I get fired?
yeah.
Because if you think about it, if you're
I've
busting
had
your
that.
butt off
I've
at
I
work,
felt that.
you're
It's
working
like,
hard. I
it's
know
today
that's
the day.
tiring, but at least you don't have the constant fear or the threats of getting fired. So if you find yourself in that position, lack of job security, that can be very stressful. That's something that you should be aware of. So that's fair warning if you decide to quiet quit. All I'm saying is, if you're going to try quiet quitting, if you're going through it right now, just understand the consequences. And I'm telling you that I don't think that quiet quitting is a good long-term solution. If you're going to be working, whether it's for someone else or if you're going to be self-employed, you're going to want to be engaged and interested in whatever it is that you're doing. Like, I think that's very important for, your mental health and for your well-being, just generally. Now, I'm going to end with this. Perhaps the right answer is to find a new company or find a new field or even start your own business. So I'm going to tell you this. This sounds so cheesy, but it's the truth. Like, life is too short, and you don't want to be spending or wasting 40 hours a week for the majority of your life doing something that you don't want to do or that you're not interested in. You're going to be miserable. So I understand that you have responsibilities, you have financial obligations, but you also have a responsibility to yourself to not be miserable. And if you go through this like emo, quiet quitting phase for an extended period of time, you're going to be miserable. So you need to find a solution, because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. So I used quiet quitting as a stepping stone to realize and to achieve my solution. I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for all the support. Please subscribe, and I wish you a very nice day.
Yeah, and the current job I have right now, I'm extremely happy. Again, I quit the restaurant gig, and I went to this other job, and I kind of went back to retail. But again, I drew the line, and they respected it. They understood. Like, again, I was clear about what was going to happen. It's like the days that I wanted to work, I'm not going to overwork, whatever, and they respected it. And I'm genuinely happy. Like, I don't feel stressed out that I'm doing something wrong or doing, like, I'm not doing my effort, because they know what the situation is. Like, I'm not going to go crazy above and beyond here. I'm just going to do what I can, and that's it. So, yeah. So, what if we stop working? Let's see what happens.
This episode and others like it are made possible by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon. My AdSense revenue has completely tanked in the last couple months. So if you'd like to help support this channel and get a bunch of cool perks while you're at it, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought. What if we stopped working? No, really, what if tomorrow we just didn't clock in? What if every single one of us just stopped, right now, and saw what would happen?
Bikini Bottom is literally in a state of total chaos tonight. Oh, litter!
Yo, I would hate living in Bikini Bottom. I'd be so... I don't know how people still decide to stay there, man. It's the worst place ever.
Rolly!
Goofball.
The real answer is things would go downhill real fast.
Crazy.
It would be, like, so bad. Empty shelves, empty cities, empty promises even. We wouldn't make it very long without anybody doing anything we call work. But that doesn't make what if we stopped working a useless question. Because in an otherwise simple answer, it would suck, there's something a little more interesting hiding in the background, just out of focus. What is that? Enhance. Enhance! If the answer to what if we stopped working is we can't, that begs the question, how close can we get? And that question has some pretty interesting answers. Let's back up.
Okay.
If you go to parties, you've probably been asked the question, what do you do? If you answer, I make YouTube videos, no you don't. Who would ever give you the chance to give that answer? See, the joke here is that YouTubers have no friends. Like, no one at all. Like, bottom of the barrel, trapped in a pit of loneliness.
Damn, bro. That's cold.
Anyway, the fact that what do you do is the default punch bowl question demonstrates at least one thing about our current society. Work is one of, if not the biggest part of our lives. But it doesn't have to be. Already, multiple countries are trying out things like a 4-day work week. How does this work? In countries like New Zealand, Spain, and Iceland, they ran experiments with shortening the work week to just 4 days, and then they wrote down the results, and now we're looking at them. One of the better known cases here is Iceland, which ran a couple experiments between 2015 and 2019 after unions started pushing for more time off. For a lucky 2,500 Icelandists, for a lucky 2,500 people, time on the job was decreased to just 4 days, going from 40 to around 35 hours a week. Crucially, without salaries going down even a single frozen fish, or whatever they use for currency over there.
Hello?
Unsurprisingly, it worked really well. People were happier, less likely to experience burnout, healthier. Overall, they just had a better life. And thanks to the successes of the experiment and the strength of trade unions, over 80% of people in all of Iceland shortened their working hours or gained the right to after these trials were run. Even
nice.
fancy business people in suits were happier because they got to save on some of their costs and didn't see a dip in productivity. Because, as you might not find very surprising, productivity has a diminishing returns curve. The longer you work, the less productive you are. Each new hour of time on the job brings less and less benefit and is more and more justified in being lopped off entirely. And these sorts of experiments are all well and good, but what if we went even
kinda
further?
loud, I ain't gonna
This
lie.
week's episode is a little different. Usually, videos on this channel focus on the bad stuff. Ooh, we hate bad stuff. Sorry,
Yeah,
ignore him. I
boo.
don't know how he got in here. And no doubt about it, this video is still going to have some of that with a side of political theory to appease the nerds. But for the next 15 or so minutes, we're mainly going to answer a couple questions about work. What it is, why it's such a big deal for some people, and why it could just not be. Because it could. We don't need to work so damn hard. You'd think that that fact would make for easy political points, just right there for the taking. Who wouldn't vote for the candidate or the party that's going to make their lives more pleasant, less constrained, more free of work? And
Get
in
my
some
vote, that's for
countries,
sure.
they do have that kind of politics. But the
okay.
reality is that neither major political party here in the US is trying to reduce the time we spend at work.
We have to get back to work. Our people want to work. They want to go back. They have to go back.
A job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about your place in the community. My North Star-
Neither party is trying to meaningfully reduce our working hours, despite enough people hating their jobs so much that Forbes, of all magazines, can run a listicle with 15 ways to, quote, rise above resenting your job, with such helpful tips as, get over it. That's not to say that the sentiment doesn't exist at all in our government.
What?
Democrat Mark Takano is trying to get a bill for a 32-hour work week through Congress. But by and large,
really?
neither party is anti-work. Should they be? Okay, let's go over some definitions. Despite being an illegal wordle guess, work is actually a word. Work is the effect we have on the world. It's using your physical or mental effort to achieve something. Without any work at all by anyone, we'd all die. Without nurses, electricians, teachers, people getting out of bed to make breakfast, society would crumble pretty quickly. We would be completely idle, and not for long. Some amount of work always needs to be done. Nowadays, some work gets paid with money, and some work gets paid with no money or barely any money, and also disdain. Being against work, or anti-work if you spend any time on the worst place on the internet, isn't ignoring that fact.
Reddit?
It's recognizing that some work always needs to be done, but that the conditions that shape that work should be different than they are now. It's saying that the goal shouldn't be to work as much as possible, but as little as possible to achieve what we want. The goal is to maximize leisure and the quality of that leisure by balancing that interest with the necessity of work. The goal isn't to not work at all, but to work for things that matter and on good terms. This is gonna sound really obvious, but for most of us, that's not how work goes. Work is something we need to do to get access to the things we need to live, like food, shelter, and healthcare. Under capitalism, the only way to get these basic necessities of life is to work in some way or another and get a wage at the end. You work or you starve. Seems pretty coercive. While at
Basic
work, you
civilization.
have no or very little input
Trade-offs.
on your work conditions. Sometimes they're okay, other times not. On top of that, our whole lives are conditioning us for that reality and imbuing it with value. Work will set you free, no pain, no gain, or there's no such thing as a free lunch are some examples of the ideological discourse that accompanies the material reality of coercion and makes it seem more natural, more palatable. Our necessity to work is accompanied by a psychopolitics trying to enshrine work, in the largest possible sense, as a value. But it doesn't seem to work as well as the benefactors of that discourse want it to. When you consider how much of our time we spend thinking about not working, whether it's dreaming up a vacation we want to take, fantasizing about winning the lottery and quitting, or buying an
don't wanna
ironic
win the
Garfield
lottery.
mug, it seems like we all want
That one I want to do. But lottery, I would never want to win it. I'd be 100% that one dude that's living in the cardboard box. Like I can't hold on to money like that in such a fast amount of time. I would have to get like at least a solid education on how to be financially steady. Cause bro, nah, too much money
to
at
stop
one time
working
will ruin
pretty
you.
badly. And yet, when we're given the chance, a good chunk of us keep working even when we don't need to. Some billionaires still work, as do many lottery winners. Retirees often volunteer or continue working in some capacity, even when their needs are met and they're supposed to be in the part of their lives where they stop. So, do we like to work, or do we hate it? The obvious answer is that it depends. What does it depend on? Meaning. When we find work meaningful, we're more than happy to do it. And there are a couple ways that work can have meaning. There's the most obvious one, which is that work which allows us to develop our talents and interests, to self-actualize. Then there's work that grants us autonomy and control over the work itself and the product of that work. And of course, there's work that produces something of importance. These kinds of really obvious factors give work meaning, and help explain why people work on things even when they have no need to and could live in complete and total leisure. But unfortunately, in the US and the UK, around a quarter of people feel like their job is completely meaningless. And a big chunk of people on top of that aren't really sure, don't really know if their job is meaningless. They just don't know, they can't figure it out. Which is really to say that their jobs aren't evidently meaningful either. That doesn't mean that every single one of their jobs is entirely pointless. Meaning and purpose are different, even if there's bound to be a big overlap in that group between pointless and meaningless work. But it definitely means that, at the very least, those jobs are alienating. They're jobs that feel bad to do. They're jobs that aren't imbued with meaning. And that's not even the whole picture. Of the 8 to 9 hours spent every day at work by millions of people, between 1.5 and 3 of them are spent on private activities. We might call this wasted time. Not in the sense that it's not good, it's totally fine by me, but in the sense that it's not really the purpose of being at your job. But as you might expect, or are doing right now watching this video, in which case, nice, workers spending that time on personal things are still pretending like they're being productive during these hours of work that aren't quite downtime, but aren't quite work either. It's ridiculous. While part of this rightfully stolen time is a form of worker resistance, the clear majority of it comes from having nothing to do but being stuck at work, forced to keep up the appearance of click-clacking away or calling people who really don't want to talk to you, just because that's what your boss expects. You're not really free to do what you want, but you're not really working either. And when people are working, not committing, quote, time theft, an even bigger number of them are working on pointless, mind-numbing tasks like moving data from one Excel spreadsheet to another, responding to emails, or writing reports for someone to throw in a drawer and never look at. Busy work. The point of all this is that there's a tremendous number of people who do nothing at all day, by their own admission, but still have to do it. There's a true army's worth of people wasting their lives behind computers, standing up for long hours in the same 2 square feet, working through the night. And for what? A great many of them just for the appearance of productivity, or the appearance of luxury, or the appearance of importance, to make someone else feel good and pad their wallet just that little bit more by making sure everyone else knows how very important they are. After all, why would someone who's not important have all those underlings? The cost of this bullshit economy is tremendous. Bullshit workers are being robbed of a life. And we have a terrible response to this fact of modern society. In liberal circles, the idea is to redirect everybody to public works projects, achieve full employment, bringing money into people's hands so they can spend it on goods that recirculate that money into the economy and produce more, trying to give, quote, dignity to jobs that are clearly just exploitation turned up to 11. On the right, the idea is to pump more money into businesses on the foolish hope that they're going to just create more jobs, or deregulate workers' rights to the extreme so that they can fire everybody into the worst kind of poverty we can conjure up, and pay the lucky few still employed next to nothing. Run the leanest operation possible, Uberize everything, and sell the precarity of unstable, low-paid work without a safety net as choosing your own hours, or being your own boss. Very few people are willing to embrace the most obvious conclusion. A lot of this is unnecessary. We're working too much. If we distribute the workload and the benefits more evenly, we can work a lot less. Politics isn't the only place where myopic conclusions about work are reached. When we get out of the realm of explicitly political discourse, and into the space we arbitrarily separate out as social, the same tropes and attachment to work aren't hard to find. Hustle culture, the rise and grind set, whatever you want to call the ideology juice that gets a millionaire to spend his free time flipping garage sale toys for $15. This modern phenomenon is another way in which this political attachment to the Protestant work ethic gets absorbed into our everyday lives. Another way to try to attach meaning to exploitative work, rather than limit labor to work that is already meaningful and practical. Instead, shaping people's entire identity around turning idle time
Rise
into
and
another
grind.
buck. Clearly, we have an abundance of free time right there for the taking. So many
Love
people
it.
wouldn't feel like their jobs were meaningless if there wasn't some truth to it. So much time at work wouldn't be spent slacking if it couldn't be. The truth is, we've made tremendous progress in terms of productivity over the last 100 years. Automation and industrialization alone have taken some of the more laborious activities we used to call work out of human hands entirely. But in over 80 years, the 40-hour work week hasn't budged. It's not laziness to ask for more time for leisure. It's efficiency. It's purely pragmatic. We accomplish the same amount in a couple hours as it used to take a full day. More
Let's
on a
follow
Monday than
Iceland.
used to be possible with most of a week. We automated away many of the things we didn't want to do so that we had the time to do the things that we do want to do. Spending that time we earned creating new jobs where we feel stuck at work for hours on end just because we have no good mechanism to distribute work and protect the unemployed means failing to realize the goals of automation. It is wasting all that progress. And yes, it's undoubtedly not so black and white. Some of the industrialization and automation of the past century has allowed us to take on new work that does actually improve our quality of life. But focusing exclusively on that to justify useless jobs with the sole purpose of padding some higher-up's wallet and satisfying the doctrine that, well, everybody has to work, is ignoring the main way we could be improving our lives today, making work a smaller part of it. Okay, so what if we tried answering the question, how close can we get to eliminating work, in an unscientific way? If we took the estimate of 25% of people having meaningless jobs at face value, which in all fairness is a stretch, we're eliminating 25% of our work hours. Work weeks go from 40 hours to 32 here in the US. That's not bad.
That's not
And
bad
we
at
don't
all.
have to accept the fact that these jobs are actually meaningless to want to reduce the time spent on them. Even if these jobs do have a purpose, the feeling of meaninglessness they create clearly demonstrates that they are incredibly mentally damaging for the people working in them. Reducing those hours, like we would with incredibly physically demanding jobs, makes sense beyond a strict productivity maximization framework. In another example, what if we took that statistic about 1.5 to 3 hours being completely wasted every day? Taking that into account, you end up with somewhere between a 27 and a 33-hour work week. That's also pretty good.
Yep.
And if this seems like an absurd way to calculate how much time we're working, I agree with you. I shouldn't be plucking numbers out of this or that study, doing simple divisions and calling it a day. But this is no less absurd than how we determine work hours right now. Just a couple people at every company write your contract. They set your working hours, with the only limit being what the law says they can't go over, pushing most industries right up to that 40-hour clock out. And the only reason that number isn't any higher is thanks to decades of
Yo, 60-hour work weeks should be legal. Holy shit, I had 12-hour shifts for 6 days or for 5 days. And that was the worst. I felt miserable. Like I was in charge for a little bit and I was like, okay, why not? Next thing you know, I see 12 hours for 5 days, just boom, boom. And there'd be days where, an employee would call off. And so I had to come in and I had to do like a 12-hour shift. It was miserable. Like, holy moly. I've never, that should be illegal. 60-hour work weeks should be illegal. Never ever should we work 60 hours. Those are the worst.
of worker agitation, revolts, protests, demonstrations, other synonyms for people being angry, clawing it from industry. Were it not for the gains of militant workers, we'd still be punching in 12-hour days side by side with newly minted 12-year-olds. This is an absurd way to decide how much work needs to be done. Letting a couple guys make all their demands and only tempering them when society faces mass-scale agitation and violence bubbling up in the streets is absurd. It shouldn't get to this point. The clearly better way to determine working time is to work for necessity and desire, to make decisions in common about needs and allocations of resources. to use governments, organizations, and democracy everywhere across the board to establish how much we work and how much we set aside for leisure. To disentangle work from necessity so that we can really make these decisions without constantly fearing for our meals and fighting others for the scraps. In short, to include democracy in economic decisions. To take into account our resources and desire to work without constantly fearing that every drop of sweat we don't shed means worrying about being taken over by the other sweatier worker at the other sweatier company. To stop people who profiteer off the work of others by hogging everyone else's free time. To not have a system that decides how much we work based on how much the guy at the top really wants a new watch. Missed birthdays, funerals, and every other life event in between be damned. Now, this isn't about getting back to some primitive way of life, idealized beyond the reality of tremendous hardship and ableism past societies encountered without the technological and social advancements we have today. This is about taking stock of all the time going straight down the drain for no good reason other than keeping an unjust system chugging along. This is about enjoying a life like we have now with more time to actually enjoy it. If you spent a couple less hours at Best Buy, would society be okay? Or AutoZone, or making coffee, or on the clock in your cubicle? Sure, GDP could go down a bit, but we already know how the GDP gets broken down between the rich and the poor anyway. We wouldn't be maximizing profits and exhausting all the human labor power at our disposal. But that is not the point of being human in the first place. So long as we can reorganize our society towards one in which GDP dips aren't synonymous with austerity for the majority, where we care more about the productive resources at our disposal than the numbers on a screen meant as a proxy of those resources, we can dramatically change the nature of work and how much time we decide to put into it. Even without touching those structures, we can still meaningfully cut our work time. Today, burnout rates are through the roof. More and more people are being pushed into holding multiple jobs. People are desperate for leisure time but can't afford to take it. We as human beings need time to do whatever we want, for everyone. Art, music, reading, going back to school, watching TV shows, playing sports, cooking, being with friends, traveling, volunteering, farming, doing literally nothing, or even working, just on something else. It's within our reach. Our obsession with the ideology of work and the coercive model of decision-making holding our society captive are the only barriers to its achievement. We can build a world where work is rewarding, meaningful, and fair.
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. Like if Iceland,
I'm gonna be honest.
push it,
YouTube has really been screwing me lately. My
I'll be
AdSense
happy.
revenue is down to a third of what it was a couple months ago, and subscribers aren't being notified of my uploads. If you'd like to help support content like this, remember to click the bell and select all to make sure you get a notification for each new upload. And if you'd really like to help keep the lights on and you're able to chip in even $1 a month, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Every patron, regardless of donation amount, gets early access to every video, plus access to our patrons-only Discord server. I do a live Q&A for patrons once a month, and it's always a lot of fun. So if you'd like to join our growing community and help keep my channel afloat, visit patreon.com/secondthought to become a patron. Thank you all so much for your support. I really couldn't do it without you.
This was a great
If
video.
you enjoyed this video, consider dropping a like. If you hated it, a thumbs down.
Obviously, I'm gonna drop a like. Yeah, man. That I don't think the world will come to an end if we reduce like certain hours. You know, unless someone is willing to wants to do it, and I guess I don't really mind. Whatever, I don't care. But there should be an option where you can work less and still get paid enough for you to be able to pay your bills and not having, especially in the big cities, you know, like those big cities, bro, like New York, LA, Miami, bro, you need to work 2 jobs. You need to be a drug dealer on the side and whatnot. You got to do all this shenanigans just for you to pay a 1-bedroom or heck, a freaking bachelor, you know. It's super frustrating sometimes to hear about, but yeah, I would love for politicians to kind of see that side, but I don't have hope. Iceland, I need to move to Iceland if anything. If anything, you know.